Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident Podcast. It is a weekly chat about socially conscious topics impacting the culture. On this episode, we are joined by Sambaza, host and creator of the Sambaza Podcast.
So if they tell you this story the way they wanted you to hear it, it'll come out that way. But if you tell it the way you want to tell it, and it's coming from your side, and like I said, your story, black person saying it out loud, you making him the hero. Anybody come to listen in your voice and knows, hey, when it goes checks out who Dominic is, they're like, oh yeah, okay. That's what I saw, and that's what I heard from that particular episode, and that really resonated a lot as to how different it can be when you project that that type of energy, the main character energy in a black person, especially in those episodes.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident Podcast, a weekly chat about socially conscious topics impacting the culture. We are excited to introduce Sambaza, host and creator of Sambaza Podcast. Hailing from the Republic of Kenya in East Africa, Sambaza has made a remarkable impact in podcasting, earning 3 nominations for Best African Diasporan Podcast by the APVA, and was a featured presenter at the 2024 Afros and Audio Podcast Festival, and was a participant at the 2025 Podfest. Sambaza brings a wealth of knowledge and unique perspectives, and we are glad to have him. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going there, Jen? It's another day, another dollar. I just say, but for me, it's another podcast. It's Wednesday, and I'm glad to be here. Hey, I think we're gonna add one more nomination to what I have right now. Interesting.
Yes.
I've been selected to represent blogs for Africans on Texas Creator Awards. First one in Waco. It's going to be on March the 2nd. So we're going to add another nomination there. And I'm so excited today. Like I said, and by the way, it's also Africa Podcast Day. We've been celebrating all through the whole day. We had a panel in the morning on Afropods. I will put a link here, and you guys can go check it out and enjoy it. It was great. A panel of 4 other podcasters from Africa. And Jen, actually, you had to help us out producing the show on the background. I do appreciate all that you did. Awesome. It made that creation look so professional. And shout outs to you. We really appreciate the work that you did. Ready for another day. What we got today?
Absolutely. Kudos to you on your nomination, and good job well done on your presentation with the group. I'm looking forward to checking out the final cut of that. We will include that link so that you guys can take a look and share any feedback that you have for Sambaza as we celebrate not only African Podcast Day, but Black History Month also. So we in this episode we have a really special guest. Dominic Lawson from the Black is America podcast will be joining us. So he will share about a new podcast project as well as the intersection of Black history, mental health, advocacy, and storytelling. So I'm really looking forward to this episode. And before we introduce our guest, Sambaza will share an affirmation. We want to continue promoting positive mental health, and so we want to keep sharing affirmations.
All right, so this is going to be short. The affirmation for today is, I am turning down the volume of negativity in my life while simultaneously turning up the volume of positivity. There we go.
Thank you for sharing.
How's that sound? Good?
It does. I think it's really important that we do the affirmations. So I'm glad you had the idea to do that. Everybody should, take a moment, maybe in the beginning of the day, get started with your day, and listen to or read some affirmations. There's actually some YouTube videos that you can play where it just like constantly, plays out. So you can take a look at those. Yeah, so I'm glad that we are incorporating that to promote positive mental health. So let's get into it and introduce our guests. Today we have a phenomenal guest who is making waves in both podcasting and educational spaces. A proud Memphis native, a military veteran, and multi-award winning podcast host and producer, Dominic Lawson, the co-founder of Owls LLC, an educational consulting firm, and has hosted multiple podcasts covering topics from business to mental health. His critically acclaimed podcast, Black is America, which highlights iconic Black history moments, has launched a brand new season, which we're really excited about that. And if that wasn't enough, he's preparing to launch an all-new mental health podcast this May. With speaking experience at South by Southwest, Podfest, Dominic is also deeply committed to the next generation, teaching podcasts to the youth in Memphis and empowering young voices to tell their own stories, which we are just so thrilled about that. In this episode, he will share part of his journey, the importance of mental health conversations, and how podcasting can be a tool for education and empowerment. So, with all of that, we are very thrilled to share Mr. Dominic Lawson.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I was
Absolutely.
starting to figure out who you're talking about there. It's a lot of feel like a mouthful, but I'm deeply honored to be here with you both, Jen and Sambaza, and I love some of the new things you've added to the show. It's really cool, and so just glad to be here.
Absolutely, thank you.
And that was a lot of stuff that you've done so far. And I was just looking at a picture the other day of you that you had on your poster when we started Clubhouse, and I used to see you coming through the rooms, and I was usually inquiring, who's this guy? What is he about? And he kept on talking about the narratives and the stories. But once I got to catch up and listen to you, I think that was the moment when I realized, yeah, you had something great going on.
Not the picture with all the books.
Yeah. I even have that as my on his icon for my screensaver.
Oh.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I got all those books for free.
I remember you saying that.
For free for just like booking like people who had books to promote and stuff like that. So like one of the things that I would do is like, yeah, they come on, but you gotta give me their book for free, right? Even though it wasn't no problem, they was going to do it anyway because that's kind of the business and how it works. But yeah, it was kind of like one of those things where you kind of you get knowledge and the guest, right? And I learned a lot of great stuff in those books, so it's pretty cool.
That was awesome. So to start us off, I'm gonna set you off with a proverb. Now, our proverb is gonna come from all the way in Ethiopia. Now, before we get to talk about Ethiopia, I just want to throw in 5 fun facts about Ethiopia that you need to know. It is the oldest country in Africa. Ethiopia is the only country in the world with a 12-hour system counting from dawn to dusk and from dusk to dawn. Coffee was first discovered in Ethiopia, and they got some good coffee. Actually, we're drinking that this week. The Rastafarian movement has links to Ethiopia, and they use a 13-month calendar, and I think they're kind of behind. I could go on and on about this, but one last thing I'll throw in here is the Ark of the Covenant is believed to be in a church in Ethiopia.
Interesting.
Wow. All right, so here's a proverb for the day. It's actually an Oromia Ethiopian proverb. It says, "Coffee and love taste best when hot." Oh, and thanks, Valentine's is coming soon. Okay.
Coffee and love.
You want to repeat it again?
Hot? Did I get it right? Coffee and love taste better hot.
Coffee and love taste best when hot. I didn't look at it. I just went and random. So.
Well, no, you're right. It is definitely in time for Valentine's Day. I can agree with that. Right? It's like that's why your spouse always wants you to eat your food when they cook it for you at its optimum level. right? And obviously when you're in love with somebody, you find them attractive and all the things, but also you have an intimacy, right? Like where it's like um you share things and this, that, and the other. So, I can see that. I feel that. Right in time for Valentine's Day.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, that's it. That's a problem for the day.
We'll accept
Now,
that.
Very nice. Very nice. I hate
it starts us off for the
drinker.
Valentine because we won't be here. Valentine's or Friday, whatever is coming up this season. So it's maybe this week or something like that. And then, hey, by the time we come back next week, it's already over. But hey, you started it off for us here on the show, and for everyone else, we'll send those well wishes for them as they celebrate with their loved ones. Now, start you off. You just launched a new season of Black is America. This is the podcast about Black history in celebration of the new season. Please share how you came to create Black is America and your proudest moment of the show. First of all, you had us waiting for that show. Not fair, but I'll let you start off with that. But go ahead and tell us.
You said I had you waiting for the premiere. You said talking about the season 4 premiere
this season, yeah.
Listen, man, that narrative is a laborious task, right? Mm-hmm. Like it is a laborious task. And so when you think about those other narrative shows that are out there and they have a team of 12, 14 people, and you're talking about a team of 1, 2, maybe 3 from time to time, like that, it takes a lot. But what you will get from people waiting is the high quality and production value. Like that's where we make up for it in that regard. Because that I feel you, Sambaza. That is the biggest gripe people have about Black is America. It takes too long and it's not as many episodes. And I feel them on that. But I think going to this new once a month format, we're definitely going to be able to kind of give you that quality on a more regular basis, right? And so we're going to do some things. Also, even though we're going to do new episodes once a month, we're going to do a few things in between that time with blog posts and share certain segments of the show on the RSS feed. So that way, new listeners can get involved. But also, maybe you want to rehear your favorite part of the show, and so we'll have that on the RSS feed. So that'll be a little bit more consistent, as they say in the podcasting space. But I started Black is America on a few years ago, back in 2020. Well, technically 2021 is where the ideation for Black is America came up. May of 2021. I remember I always wanted to do something with Black history, but I think one of the things that kind of pushed me over the top was a Hollywood producer saying, like, you know what, every story that's already been told, that's been told, that needs to be told, has already been told. It's like, that's for damn sure not correct. And so being a person of color and being on, social media, I can't tell you how many times in Baza where, you see some type of random Black history fact, right? Something you never caught in school, something you never heard of. And for me, that one that really stood out was the story of John Fox. The story of John Fox was when he's in this village, World War II soldier in Soma Colonia, and basically he's surrounded by Germans and he doesn't see a way out. And so he's in this tower calling military fire, to different coordinates. And when he gets to the point where he's surrounded and he sees no way out, he says, call military fire on himself. And they do that. They call the strike on his position, kills him and 100 Germans. And so those are the stories, Sambaza, that I wish I would have had that in grade school, right? Because that affirmation, like you doing the affirmations earlier, that affirmation, that story lets us know that, like, not only are we not the sidekicks of the story, but we're the heroes in the story. We have MCE in Black American United States. We have main character energy in this country as Black people. And so it doesn't have to be on some whole tokenism type of deal, some whole sidekick deal. And so when it comes to Black is America, I make sure to highlight that person as the protagonist, right? As the person who's the hero, the person who's wearing the big hat, if you will, right? And so that's kind of where that came from, and just wanted to tell these stories in a new and unique way. Because the thing is like, when it comes to history, I can tell you stats and dates and figures and locations and all the things. But what if I can put you there? What if I can put you in that tower of Summer Colonial? What if I can put you in the race car of a Wendell Scott? What if I could put you in the sewing room of an Ann Lowe? What if I can put you on those those steps in Washington, D.C. with the Marian Anderson? And so my job as the content creator is to put you there. And so that's what we've been doing over the past 4 years. And I think the proudest moment, honestly, Sambaza, is when my wife will play some of these snippets. My wife, Kendall Lawson, who you guys graciously had on your show here a few months back. And she'll go to a school that she's working in that day, and she's in the social studies class, and she'll play an episode of Black is America. And the kids, you know how kids are and teenagers, they're not really paying attention, like, yeah, whatever, it's free time. And then all of a sudden over time, you see them like, wait, what's happening? What's happening? And then they're like really engaged. And then they just be like, we really did that? And you just go like, yeah, we really did that. And so I think that right there is the proudest moment, because again, it's that affirmation that like, you've been told you were this way. You've been told you were that way. Let me show you a story. Let me share with you a story that says, no. We have main character energy. We have so much invested in the story of the United States. And on top of that, again, Black history is American history. Point blank, period, end of discussion, full stop. It's just that, because the story of America would be incomplete. It would be different. It will almost be non-existent without Black America. And so that's what we try to present in every episode of Black is America. Hope that answers your questions.
Yes, it does. And actually, to tell you the truth, I remember what I was doing when I listened to your podcast. I was driving from New Orleans when I was listening to those podcasts of yours for the first time, and I went like, golly, I even want my kids to listen to this podcast, because it's history, and the way you bring it out is awesome. So I'll let Jen go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, and actually, you shared, Dominic, that Black of America originally was going to conclude prior to now at one point, but so we would love for you to share what motivated you to continue after that thought, and how did that decision shape the direction of the show?
There's a few things. One was I was telling an older Black woman that I was going to end the show, and she's like, no, you don't. You will not. This show is too important. This show is too important. It's too good, right? And you have people engaged in this process. So no, you don't. You will not. So that's one. But number two, after that is, listen, let's be honest here for a second. There's an attack on Black history.
Yes,
there is. From trying to say that we weren't enslaved, but we were just, like we were volunteers, and we came over on this cruise ship for a new life, right? Like, these rewriting of these narratives, like, oh, that's what happened, because I got pictures that say otherwise, right? And so there's an attack on Black history right now, and I think that, with podcasts like Black is America and others, like, we have to stand in the gap. Because one of the things I've started saying now there's two things I've been saying now. One, if you want to come for Black history, pull up. I got something for you. So that's number one. And two, you can't burn a podcast. You might can burn a book. You can't burn a podcast.
Ooh.
Good luck with that. And so that is why and I said the trailer, the work continues, because, you know, even if I don't put out an episode every week or every 2 weeks or something like that, we do this once a month thing, it's still evergreen. I got a question from somebody the other day when we released the Doug Williams episode. It's like, you know, you released it on a Friday, 2 days before the Super Bowl. It's like, it's not going to be relevant anymore. Like, no, I was thinking about the next 25 Super Bowls. Like, this story will always be relevant.
Absolutely.
About how black QBs were treated, you know, and how they, you know, just thinking about like how they were not as smart, you know, couldn't understand the game at that level from the QB1 position, stuff like that. But no, like, that's the thing about these stories. Like, they're going to be evergreen. Like, you can listen to the ALO story today. You can listen to the ALO story 10 years from now, 20 years from now. It will still be relevant because, again, there needs to be these points of affirmation that young people can look up to. Like, oh, so I can do that. I can go and maybe seek out NASCAR, or I can go win Grammy for Best Country Album, and then go flip it and win Album of the Year with that same damn country album, because black people have been engaged in country music since its inception and probably predates it with the Banjar back in Africa. But let me not get on my soapbox with that. I got to say that for Black is America in June on our episode from banjos to Beyonce. But
we got a sneak peek here.
Yeah, that's going to be in June, because
I love that.
But the thing is like, you've been led to believe that things like NASCAR is just for a certain group of people. You've been led to believe that country music is just for a certain group of people. You've been led to believe that hockey is just for a certain group of people.
Yes.
That is not true. And so these stories matter, because what if there's a kid in Chicago? What if there's a kid in Omaha? What if there's a kid in Phoenix? Like, you know what? I kind of like country music, but none of my friends like country music. There's no black people in country music. Like, no. That's why we need to see Beyonce doing her thing. That's why we need to see Shabuzi doing his thing. That's why we need to see I'm blanking on her name. She does the song Buckle Bunny, right? Like, we need those stories out here. And so that's where Black is America fits in. And so to answer your question, Jen, it's a call to action, because, like I said, Black history appears to be under attack. And so I'd be damned to have this medium and this craft and this talent to tell these stories, to just sit on my hands and just watch it happen. At least not without a fight, at least.
Absolutely.
Now, doing this, when you talk about Black history, there's an episode there about Wendell, the NASCAR rally driver that won the race, and then he was made to go extra laps. Now, ESPN did a show before that, before I heard yours. I can tell you there's a whole different ways that you put it to make it even more interesting. CNN was more visual. Not CNN, ESPN was more visual. I saw it. They did all their rounds, but it didn't explain. I didn't feel that heart in it. But when I listened to how you portrayed him, you didn't portray him as a failure in the end. You always portrayed him as a winner.
Main character energy.
And CNN took their own angle. Like, they wanted to create like a sorrowful story. But from your story, you kind of gave him, not kind of, but you did give him the upper thing, like you said. You are the main character energy, MCE. So you gave him the main character energy, and at the end, when I listened to it, I was like, yeah, you know what? He did do a lot for what he had done. But whoever tells the story, remember what they said, stories are told by the ones who won the battle.
Correct.
So if they tell you this story the way they wanted you to hear it, it'll come out that way. But if you tell it the way you want to tell it, and it's coming from your side, and like I said, your story, Black person saying it out loud, you making him the hero. Anybody come to listen in your voice and knows, hey, when it goes checks out who Dominic is, it's like, oh yeah, okay. That's what I saw, and that's what I heard from that particular episode, and that really, really resonated a lot as to how different it can be when you project that that type of energy, the main character energy in a Black person, especially in those episodes.
No, I appreciate you pointing that out. That's a main tenet of the show. At the like, I always kind of when I'm carding or like kind of like putting together the story I want to tell. I always start from the end. At the end of this episode, I want you to feel uplifted, positive thinking, all those things, affirmed, if you will. Now, I'm not going to shy away from certain things that are true, right? If there's certain things that are important to the story that are negative, as a history enthusiast, I have to tell that part. Like that's just one of those things where if we're going to be credible in podcasting, you have to tell that part, right? That's really important. However, I can put that part in context, right? I can't, for example, like Wendell Scott didn't win a ton of races. I mean, he could have won more races, but when you add the context is because he was battling systemic racism. He was battling the fact that he didn't get funding. He was battling the fact that like he had to work on his own car. He did not have a pit crew for the most part. He had to work on his own car in order, like he would literally pull into the pit stop, hop out, get under the hood, work on what he needs to do, get back into the car, and then go back into right. Everybody else had like a team of people, right? And so again, there's something powerful in that. There's something in us that says like, listen, yes, the odds are stacked against us. Yes, there is adversity. However, we will continue to move. We will continue to move forward. And so when I tell these stories, that's important. I want you to feel like this person is the hero, right? And that's another reason why I don't share certain stories, right? And it's not to say that they're not important. It's just that that's not my ministry. Like I will share the story of Emmett Till. I will share the story of some of the other things that happened in the civil rights movement, right? That are very sad, right? However, I know those stories can be sometimes traumatizing, right? To certain things. When you talk about lynchings, you talk about fire bombings and all the things, right? And so when it comes to Black is America, I'm trying to do the opposite. I want you to feel good to be Black. That is what I want you to feel good being Black. I want you to know that you're intelligent. I want you to know that you're worthy, and I want you to feel affirmed. That is what Black is America is supposed to be, right? And is also within that sharing that the story of America includes Black America. It's also the fact that we ain't going no damn where. So you might as well get used to it, right? And so it's important to tell those stories in that way. It really is. And I take it to heart.
Yep.
No, I was just going to say that's the power of storytelling, which, we talked about that as a theme of today, redefining the narratives and storytelling. And we've talked about this when you were here before, the intersection. We're going to pivot into mental health shortly, but I wanted to focus on Black history initially, which, Sambaza was kind of like, wait a minute, it's like, no, we have to do it this way because we want to stand out. Like you said, there's an attack on Black history, coming from, very powerful people in our country, which is very alarming, and even some of the people, our favorite entertainers, making these statements about, Black history and slavery was a choice or whatever, like you said, to that narrative, we have as a storyteller, you have the power to, share those narratives in a way.
Right. Of course. And again, like I said, like, I'm not going to shy away. I'm not going to make something up because that's not good podcasting. Right. But I can provide that context. And at the end of the day, I can flip it to share. Like somebody just said in the comments, we show up in spite of. We show up in spite of, and I think that's important to do, because again, we have main character energy, and I think people want to have this narrative that we don't, but we do, and so Black is America is a vehicle to show main character energy in Black America.
Right. Amen. you want to check the comments
Yeah,
section?
sure. Okay.
Let's see. Ed Campbell says peace and understanding that Black history is every day without Black. Um, history. There is no history. Why there's no without Black history. There's no history. Why is there such thing called Black history, but no such thing as white, Asia, Italian history? It was a combination. And then he asks, what are some empowering, enlightening books by Black authors that teach us about our history? Interesting.
That actually I don't know the answer to that one because I dive so much into like informational text as far as like newspapers. Like I dive into the newspapers of the old Baltimore American and stuff like that, and stuff like that. So I actually don't have an answer for that. I do apologize about that, Ed Campbell.
I got a book though. It's
Okay.
rare. It's called Our Kind of People.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
You heard of that? It's rare.
Yes.
I lost it. I can't find it. But yeah, it's one of those books that when I read it, it is there. One comment that we're getting from Tiffany Bird, she says white history is just history. That's what they call it. You see, they label everything else, so it's like history is everything's theirs, and then you get ours now is classified. We even have African history. History is history.
Sure.
You know?
I think it's important to highlight and distinct Black history, mainly because it gets suppressed like it's doing now, right? And so I think, and I get the point, but it's like I think it's just important to highlight that, right? Because we do have a very unique history, and so sometimes to just kind of lump it in all together, it gets minimized, right? It's like the argument of Black Lives Matter and all lives matter, right? Yes, all lives do matter, but we're talking about Black lives right now, right? Like that's what we're talking about. And so I think Black history, the phrase and term Black history, is kind of empowering in the same way, I think.
It is. And before we pivot, it just made me think about when the Obamas were in the White House and Michelle Obama said in a speech that, Black or the slaves built this White House. And, she thinks about that every time she walks through the doors or something like that. And can you imagine like that feeling, probably like, oh my God,
Right.
I'm here and what we took to get here. And then I remember reading in the papers, like all the fact checkers, that the slaves really built the White House. Yeah, we did. Hello. I mean, that's a podcast all, alone or a movie, really. Like, I would love to, can you imagine though? That's crazy.
No, that is, and then you think about the contributions of Benjamin Banneker as it relates to the White House as well. So no, I feel you on that.
Yes, yeah, I get chills.
On the note of history, there's something you can't erase, and that's history. You cannot hide, even though they might ban the books. There's someone out there who passed on the story. Remember, when we start off with Africa, how did they bring in the seeds to start planting like kale? They put it in their hair. It was put in their hair.
Yes.
The ingenuity and thoughts of doing that, you can't stop it. So whether you try to ban these books and try to say, oh, we're not going to do this and this and this and that, you're still going to get people moving ahead. You cannot erase that. It's going to be passed on one way or the other. And right now, like you said, you can't kill a podcast.
Right. And I think I would be remiss, seeing as that is, African Podcasting Day, to think about the phrase and the term griot. Like that is the task and the responsibility I feel with this show as a griot, right? Like it's a new age form as far in podcasting form, right? As a griot, and I take that responsibility very seriously to pass down these stories of that innovation and that ingenuity and that intelligence and wit and all the things. And when you're talking about the seeds or whatever, it made me think about Valley Forge and the enslaved people there teaching the soldiers about inoculation, because had they not, Valley Forge and that whole deal, the American Revolution, that would have went in a completely different manner than it actually ended up doing. So again, we have been here since the inception and before the inception of this country. Like, we are deeply ingrained in its successes and failures, to be honest with you. But like, again, I think that, like, you know, these, long story short, full stop, these stories are too important not to tell. They're too important not to tell.
Yeah, we just have to
Absolutely.
we just have to say it in our own words and fulfill the history.
We have to own it. You're right. We have to own the narrative now. We have the capability, we have the assets, we have the platforms. We like to own the narrative now, right? And I think it's a responsibility to do so.
Amen. Now let's go into mental health. You're dabble on both. Do you think mental health is misrepresented in the Black community? And in your opinion, how can we start to change the narrative, especially now that, you know, a lot of things are being said, like, you know, when we come off strong. You know, somebody, like, I may get mad, right? But the way they look at me when I get mad, they won't say, they would take it like I'm being so aggressive. I'm being too aggressive. Whereas my counterpart, who's white, may do the same thing, but it may be looked at less. And they now look at it like my mental energy is different. How do you see as us being misrepresented, especially in the Black community?
I mean, it's unfortunate. You're talking about years and years of stereotypes, years and years of false information, and all the things. And so, when it comes to mental health and physical health, there's a lot of misconceptions out there, as if, you know, because and I imagine if you come off as, or you're supposed to be 3/4 of a human or subhuman, then you don't have the mental capacity to have some type of mental health challenges or mental health whatever, right? Which is unfortunate. But, you know, there's definitely a lot of misconceptions, both externally as it relates to our community, but also internally as it relates to our community. I mean, we've come a long way. We have long stride. You know, there's a lot of strides that we've made in talking about and having these conversations about going to therapy, seeking treatment, and things of that nature. However, when I look at CDC reports, they're still alarming when it comes to suicide rates. It's still alarming when it comes to fentanyl overdoses. And you say, "Oh, that's some shit white people do." It's not true. I'm here to tell you it's not true, right? You know, and then even when you get into even outside of the Black community, I think CDC reports were sharing that, like, the ones that get afflicted the most when it comes to addiction and stuff like that are the Native Americans. It's very sad to see, but there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And so, again, that's why launch a new project to, again, try to help combat those things. Like, you know, from when it comes to Blacks America, we're trying to combat that assault on Black history. And so with the new project that I'm working on, we're trying to combat those misleading information that leads to ultimately harm.
Yes. And Sambaza, did you have another thought?
No, actually, you've said everything I needed to hear.
Yeah. And so that's a good place to pivot to your new project about mental health. So we would love to hear about that.
Yeah, so the new project launches May 14th. It's called Mental Health Rewritten. And the idea is to rewrite the narrative of mental health itself. Like I was just saying, like, there's a lot of information out there. A lot of it's great. Some of it's not so great, and that not so great or misleading information can lead to harm. All right. You know, there's a lot of words being used just kind of frivolously out there. Trauma comes to mind, narcissism comes to mind, you know, but these are like direct diagnoses that have definitions and treatment plans. And so we shouldn't be out here just throwing them out so casually. And so Mental Health Rewritten is meant to combat that. It's meant to combat that, but it's also meant to combat some of the shame and the guilt that people have that stop them from going to treatment, that stop them from going to speak to somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that kind of stops people from seeking treatment is the cost. We still have situations where insurance companies are not covering mental health, challenges and disorders, even though the Mental Health Parity Act clearly states that mental health challenges are just as serious as physical ones. Right. But we still have, insurance companies out there trying to skirt the law and things of that nature. And so mental health rewritten is meant to be an educational resource to get people out of the shadows of addiction and maybe some of the trauma that they feel and the things and get them to starting to have these conversations, because I think that talking about it and that awareness leads to help and treatment and hope and all the things. And so I'm super excited about it. We use for Mental Health Rewritten is a very unique format. It's narrative, obviously, because that's kind of my shtick, if you will. But I use a 312 format, if you will. So basically, you have 3 topic tracks covering 3 different scenarios across 12 episode arc. So season 1, it's all about sex. We talk about sex addiction, pornography, sexual assault, and something that most people or many people are not aware of, something called sexual anorexia, which is an actual thing. Right. And then the middle 4 episodes talks about suicide. That's the suicide track. And we talk about suicide ideation. We talk about people who have lost people who have died by suicide. And even saying die by suicide is something that we're trying to get over to the community, because to say commit suicide seems to suggest like you wanted to do this, like you wanted to end life. And so when we say die by suicide, it's a little bit more empathetic to those who have passed due to that. And then that last track is all about cultural identity and mental health. And so we'll talk about racial trauma. We'll talk about some of those mental health perspectives and challenges and disorders exclusively to the Asian community, the Latino community, and also the Jewish community as well. I'm getting ready to interview somebody who talks about, she has a very unique story where her grandmother fled Nazi Germany, moved to Ohio, and then I think the husband got like a job or something in Georgia, moved to Georgia, and was the victims of cross burnings and things of that nature. Right. So, so that's a generational trauma. So that is Mental Health Rewritten in a nutshell. I am pretty excited about it. I've created episode 1. I think you guys have listened to it. And I've got a lot of positive feedback about it. And I'm really excited about its impact and what we can do with it and going from there. So I'm pretty stoked about the prospect of it.
We're excited for you, and kudos to you on this. I love how you have it structured. I'm looking forward to. Thank you for sharing with us. And I thought it was very thoughtful, and even this, subject matter, I think was very tasteful. And absolutely.
No, I appreciate that, because when you're talking about, first of all, sex itself is taboo. It just is, right? And so when you also add the fact that there could be an addiction attached to that, and the fact that some people almost half of Americans don't believe it's a real thing, that you can be addicted to sex. But I'm here to tell you, I've talked to many people. I've seen the reports and all the things. I've talked to them directly. It's very much a real thing, right? And it's a disorder that disrupts lives, disrupts marriages, disrupts families, disrupts your career and all the things. And so, and I'm glad you said that about not overly sensationalized, whatever word you use. Forgive me, I'm blanking. But the importance is to humanize the people who are afflicted by these things, who go through these challenges, because I think when we see somebody with any type of addiction, we just think, oh, it's a moral failing, right? Not realizing that some addictions are actually just a little bit more socially acceptable, like workaholism, right? Like working too much, right? Like that's a little bit more socially acceptable than sex addiction, than alcohol, right? But it's still an addiction. It's still a disorder that can disrupt your life. It can disrupt the way you sleep, the way you eat, and all the things. And so that is what Mental Health Rewritten is setting out to do. And I'll also say this: it's actually I haven't said this publicly, but I'll say it now. Mental Health Rewritten is phase 1 of a much larger podcast rollout, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah. Before we go on, we'd like to send out this information. This is if you're experiencing any thoughts of suicide or you're in a crisis, please call 988 or text 988 and seek help, either from your local authorities or anyone else who can help you go through this issue. That
Absolutely. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's free and confidential. And if you want more information, lifeline.org. But yeah, thank you, Sambaza, for saying that. Call or text 988. I appreciate that.
There we go. Now, I listened to the show that you had. Quite interesting about how the show went and what you were talking about in the subjects. There was this idea where I don't know if, like, I think right now when you say it, it's a step towards other shows, because when you talk about sex addiction and you say that people who really don't know about that it's there and believe in it, and there are lines, there's a thin line between there's now my African thing is rolling into me and I'm getting conscious of what I can say and not say.
Listen, I get it.
It's high intensity towards wanting sex and addiction. There's a thin line between there.
Yeah.
Are you going to explore it culturally? Because coming from it from the aspect of when you're looking at it, different people behave, like you even mentioned in Denmark. Those people are open to that.
Yeah.
Whereas in African culture, there's a difference. I'll throw in a point. Maybe you might want to check out Facing Mount Kenya by Jomo Kenyatta, who the founding father. He wrote the book. And in that book, maybe you just go and read, maybe then explore much about it. But the Kikuyu people, he's talking about the Kikuyu people. They had this issue where the way they interacted sexually was so different that women and men could sleep together. Young adults and ladies, even before they get married, they were allowed to. But when the white man came into Kenya and they come in with the Bible and look at it and they're like, okay, how is it possible that a man and a woman can sleep together all night and not have sexual relations? Whereas in their country where you have this idea, but these people had their own rules of engagement. Yes, there are those who might break it, but then there's still that fact that these were the rules that were set at that time. And here's where now, when I listen to it and you say, okay, there are different aspects, where we're coming from, maybe looking at it in that perspective, it could be a bigger conversation to understand as to how and why we behave a certain way, and look at it in that way, that when it comes to the issue of now, when you talk about mental health, or you talk about addiction, I, as an African man, will tell you we have that problem. Mental health is considered like, we'll pray for it, it'll go away, right? They don't look at it in terms of a hospital, of the hospital sense. I have a loved one who's struggling with mental health, and each time we are trying to help out, it has come up certain ideas of we want to pray for it, and I've understood it up to now, and I know that, okay, yeah, we can pray for it. Yes, there's that comfort, but then there's still that idea of it's a disease, something has to be taken care of. But I'm now noticing that after a while of now pounding it and telling people, hey, you know what, this is what it is. You let people get to learn it in their own way, but it gets to a point where now people now accept it. after you learn to accept it, then you realize that mental health is a fact of life. It's there, and you need to treat it that way, not something that we're gonna pray for it and it will go away, or you'll do these prayers or healing or something like that that will change. No, it does not change.
Right.
It's something that's there. So I think that will definitely help when you talk about it and bring in the historical part, and maybe bring in some people who are of a different like you said, you're going to bring in different people from different walks of life to explain, not explain, but to kind of give their opinions on what it's all about.
Dominic?
No, it's important, right? Like that cultural piece is pivotal. How we see it, how we treat it, and all the things. And the pray about it piece is so prevalent when we think about a lot of, like, especially those very strict parts of the world as it relates to religion, right? I think I shared in the episode, like Latin America, the Middle East come to mind. And so that part is very critical. Very critical when it comes to that cultural aspect. And that's definitely something I want to absolutely have a conversation about, because again, that could be the sole purpose why somebody doesn't seek treatment, right? Because you're not praying hard enough, or you're not fasting enough, or something like that. Like, no, there is a serious disorder that's going on, and we need to address it. But also at the same time, I think we're starting to see, believe it or not, more and more members of clergy adopt the mental health aspect of their ministry, right? Which I think is very, I'm very happy to see, because I think a study said that when it comes to mental health challenges, 43% of people go to a minister first, or a rabbi, or a priest, or an imam, right? That's very significant. And so if we can empower those clergy members to have that aspect of their work, it can be very impactful, and work well with a clinician, a mental health, behavioral health clinician, to kind of work alongside them and have those trainings. It can be very impactful and very much help with that stigma and that guilt and that shame that so many people are afflicted with.
Yes.
Definitely, it'll help.
But definitely open to having those conversations, Sambaza, for sure, because I think it's a very important
awesome
conversation when it comes to those cultural pieces in different parts of the world. Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, I was just going to share that while, Sambaza mentioned like these things impact people different culturally, but these things that you've mentioned, sex addiction, thoughts about suicide and things that impacts people from all different whites, all cultures, black, white people. And I love that you are speaking with men, women, black, white people, all the different cultures, and you have done that piece. I want you to wake that up, that you have had these conversations with not just black folks, but all folks, and because everybody is dealing with these things.
Listen, when it comes to addiction, trauma, childhood trauma, disorders, gaming addiction, workaholism, whatever you want to call it, it cuts across socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnicities, religion, race, class, whatever it is. Like, I've interviewed people and have had conversations with people who have had like the world is their oyster. Like, they have a want for nothing. And honestly, it's that access that's part of the problem. Is that access to pretty much anything they want is also part of the problem, right? And so you have to get into the addictive nature of what's going on with them. And so to have these conversations with them, to have these conversations with these clinicians are just fascinating, because I'll be like, like one of the things that you heard in that episode 1 was about how when the person who stepped out in the marriage, right? And that's a lot of times what happens, or at least in my experience when I was working at a behavioral health organization, where people were seeking treatment because 9 times out of 10, the wife gave them an ultimatum, right? And that's why in that episode, you have the story of Daniel, whatever, because like that's what usually happens. But what I did not expect was the grief that the person who did the stepping out of the marriage that they would feel, right? It's this lost time, lost money, lost time with their family, lost time with their spouse, lost time with their career. And so there's a level of grief that you find yourself empathizing with the person who kind of, initiated all of this whole domino effect of like rupture and harm. So again, when it comes to mental and behavioral health, it's very tricky. Yeah. It's very tricky, right? And then you add on top of the fact, like if I look at Sambaza and I see him in a cast, like I know his arm is broke or something like that, and it's healing or whatever, right? But if I look at Sambaza and he's going through depression, I have no clue by looking at him. Right. And you often see like comedians who, like so many comedians who like have these depressive moments, and you're like, there's something making me happy. Right. From the plight that Black women feel, right? Always having to be the strong one, always having a lot of times have to be the pillar of the family and have to put on a strong face. Right. My wife was sharing some stories and some conversations just a few days ago about that very thing. Right. And so, again, it's a very tricky topic, but it's an important one. And so hopefully a show like Mental Health Rewritten can stand in the gap to be able to have these conversations open and honestly with, little shame and little guilt, right? Because that's the thing that stops people from getting the help that they need.
Sure.
And you see, Dominic, when you just said something about your wife sharing with you the experience about the woman having to be dominant. There's a podcast I always follow, Two Nilots in a Pod. And these are Africans talking about the Luo culture. And I never found out the fact that it's the women who are considered stronger, the strong person.
That wears on you, man. That wears on you. Always having to be the strong person. Right. It wears on you.
I don't know why it changed that men now are the ones who are owning land. But back in the day, women were the ones who were given land in that community. Now, another conversation. I was talking to a South African guy I met. He's white. But he clearly understands that he's South African, born and raised. So he understands that it's the women in South Africa that run the show. You cannot do anything without running the show. We have the Kikuyu culture in Kenya. It's derivative of the women. They have the groups of the clans are derivative of a woman, women's names. If you look deep into their culture, so this is to say that the woman, why I'm trying to put it in the sense that the woman has always been the stronger figure. Not that we're not strong, we're not any lesser or any whatever, but they have been bequeathed that idea of the strength and everything. But you'd have to look at the history of how it is, because back in the day, men would go fight, you die, you go away. You don't stay too long. The idea of you having to stay to your 50s and it's hard. So it was the women who stayed. So they had to hold everything around the house, which is what isn't it? That's what's happening in modern. It comes to happen in the modern, not modern, but in the slavery aspect. And then later on, now past slavery, now you see the men are being incarcerated. The women are the ones staying at home, having to take care of the kids. So I don't know if it's history repeating itself, but I'm just getting a moment there, just by looking at all this.
No, it's a lot to take in.
It is.
It's a lot to take in, a lot of considerations. So no, I feel you on that.
I'm sorry. When you just said that, I just.
No, I got you. No, it sparked something, right? No, I got you.
It's heavy. Definitely. Well, we're looking forward to the podcast. Tell us the name again and the dates.
It is Mental Health Rewritten. It launches May 14th. I think the trailers will start coming out for the show late April. There's going to be 2 trailers. One is like a general trailer, and then there's going to be a second trailer that highlights the 2 main books that are used or texts that are used in the behavioral health field, which is the DSM-5 and the ICD-11. And that is where these the diagnosis and things like that come from. There's a definition for narcissism. There's a definition for compulsive sexual behavior disorder. And these is where they come from. And so, again, it's not just another podcast spewing out, calling people narcissists. We're going to use the text. We're going to use the clinicians. We're going to use the professionals to make sure we give a technical definition of what these things are and some type of anecdote to kind of further explain what these things are and why they matter. So Mental Health Rewritten launches May 14th. I'm super excited about it, and you can listen to it on any podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on Instagram, on YouTube, because every interview I do can't make the full episode. So some of the snippets of the stuff that you won't hear on the actual episode would be on Instagram and YouTube in the form of reels and things of that nature. So,
great.
So it'd be exclusive content on those 2 platforms.
Okay.
And I got a question. You're the director of podcasts, Owls Education.
Yeah.
When you look at this, the Black of America, and you look at the mental health, it's Mental Health Rewritten, right?
Yeah.
I got it right?
Yeah, you nailed it, sir.
And I want to thank you for making us the first ones ever to talk about this on this show. This is an exclusive. It's lightly.
It's an honor, sir. It's an honor to be here with both of you.
Thank you. What role do you think the Owls Education Company is going to play for future young people, for the future, the younger generation coming up, with regard to what you're doing in terms of your storytelling and in mental health, and in talking about Black as America as a whole, as it relates to Black history?
I think it's a blueprint for young people to tell their stories their way, and tell their stories on their own terms. We've seen across the board that podcasting is becoming more and more of an educational tool, which I am so excited about. I taught a podcasting class at a middle school a year or 2 ago because they were getting ready for a capstone project, which was a podcast, right? Nice. And so, again, I hope Owls Education, as it relates to its media and its work, is a blueprint to do that, and gives permission to the next content creator, the next Black as America podcast, or whatever that looks like, to take what the historians that I learned from and move that forward, from Eyes on the Prize to many of those documentaries that I learned on PBS and things of that nature. Some of the historians that I learned from, at the museums, the National Civil Rights Museum here in Memphis, and things of that nature. Because that's all it is, man. It's passing of a torch. I received it from them. I'm doing what I'm doing, and eventually it's going to be my turn to pass that torch to the next generation, to the next griot, if you will. Yes. And to listen. And honestly, I can't wait for that to happen. Only from the standpoint of when I do Black as America and I work with the older historians, it's like, wow, man, this is crazy. This is awesome. And to see their content to be presented in this way is fascinating to them. Mm-hmm. So as the speed of technology and artificial intelligence and whatever does its thing, so the next kid 20 years later, I'm going to be like, I'm going to be Unc, right? I'm going to be Unc, like, wow, man, I love what you did with that. And to tell Black history in this way, that is really cool. And so just being able to repurpose this content, repurpose these stories to reach a new generation is something that I hope Owls Education Company is a blueprint to do that, and to say, this is how you can do it. Take it and run with it.
I'm going to pray that you're going to be ending up in DC, Washington, DC. at the museum, they have a section for you. I think there'll be something written to you about that. I think
I hope
before we
so.
finish, hey, I'm praying for it. I think before we finish, we got two more things. I think the last comment will be the one that's ultimate for what we've
Go ahead.
been doing and what we've done today. So Al says there's a book, Destruction of Black Civilization is a great book. And the last one, this is very empowering conversation. Shout out to this Blacktastic platform. Thank you, Ed, for
Thank
hanging
you,
with
brother
us.
Ed.
And thank you all for joining us. And if you're going to be watching later on, thank you. It was great today, part of the Black History Month and Africa Podcast Day.
Yes.
Thank you for gracing us. Jen, take us home.
All right. And again, thank you for joining us for another episode of Woke by Accident Podcast, Sambaza Podcast collaboration. And we hope that today's conversation have inspired and enlightened you. If you found today's episode meaningful, please consider sharing it with your friends, family. If you made it this far in the episode, please like, share, subscribe. Okay. And our collective awareness and advocacy play a crucial role in creating positive change. We invite you to stay tuned for more engaging content, and we look forward to continuing these important conversations in the future. So again, we thank you guys. And till next time, Dominic, please stay around for our proper goodbye. And everyone else, take care. At this time, we're going to go ahead and conclude the episode. We greatly appreciate you listening. We invite you to follow us on social media. On Instagram, it is Woke by Accident Podcast. On Twitter, it is Woke by. On Facebook, it is Woke by Accident Podcast. We also have the new website up, www.wokebyaccident.net. Please check us out. And also follow us on all of your favorite streaming platforms. And please leave a review and share feedback. You can also reach out by Gmail, wokebyaccident@gmail.com. And every time you listen, we appreciate it so much. Thank you for listening and take care.